Good afternoon, garden friends. As you guys know, I have been really focusing on garden bed cleanups. And one of the things that I have been doing probably for the last 2 years is really focusing on when I clean up in the fall versus the spring to see how my garden is being impacted. And one of the things that I have come to realize is for me here in Georgia, it makes sense for me to clean up in the fall. And so what I've done is I have collected some data, like I said, over the last 2 years in regards to how my garden is responding to me cleaning up in the fall versus the spring. So what I've done is I have written down some pros and cons that I have found have been beneficial. Now, one of the things that I did notice was there was some overlap in regards to benefits and also cons when it comes to the garden cleanup fall versus spring. So let me just go down through the list of things that I have captured in regards to what has been successful for me. So seeing that we are in the fall leading into the winter, we're going to start with the fall. So the first thing that I want to talk about is whether or not to be getting rid of spent flowers and debris. One thing that I have noticed is when I do the cleanup in the fall, a lot of the leaves have fallen off, the flowers are done producing. And now I have a better visual of being able to see if there's any broken branches or if there's anything disease. So one of the pros of cleanup in the fall is having that visibility. Because if you have something that is diseased, better to get it taken care of right then and there and not allow it to fester over into the spring to where now it has the possibility of spreading. The other thing is when I am doing fall cleanup, I don't know about you guys, but when I mulch in the fall, because you don't have all the foliage, because you have the ability to see the ground, see as you are cleaning up, getting debris and all of that stuff pulled away. One of the things that I end up doing is putting a layer of compost and manure on there. Now, whether I am planting bulbs or just putting a nice fresh coat over the garden, I agitate the soil just to see if there are any grubs or those nasty bugs that can end up decimating, your garden come the spring when they come out. That is one of the things that I feel is a benefit for doing cleanup in the fall. Plus, when I put down the mulch, you got a nice clean slate to be able to work with, not having to, lift up, plants and or anything like that. Just a nice clean foundation. Well, that can also apply for in the spring because nothing has bloomed yet and you still have that visibility. And when I was talking about like the mulching, what that'll end up doing when you do it in the fall, it gives your plants and roots that extra protection so that if you do end up having snow or like we did have a couple of days that we were below freezing, what that does is that helps protect your roots from getting damaged, by the cold. The other thing too with me putting on, the compost and manure, having this clay soil, even though I add that extra layer of compost and manure, I will agitate, the soil, not only for the grubs, but also to allow the compost and manure to, get down into the clay, to enrich the clay and help also amend it. The other thing is curb appeal. Now, while I may not, because of my zone, have the vibrant colors that normally, start to blossom in the spring, it just gives that nice, tidy look, to your garden that adds to the curb appeal when individuals are driving by. Another benefit of in the fall is I find that if I'm doing cleanup in the spring, I'm really not having the opportunity to truly enjoy seeing everything come to life. So by doing my cleanup in the fall, it allows me to be able to walk around the garden in the spring to see what's, coming alive and really being able to enjoy my garden each season. Now, as far as the cons when it comes to fall cleanup, one of the things that I was entertaining was allowing the leaves to, stay on the ground. And I tried. I really, really tried, but one of the things that I had noticed the one year that I did not get the leaves up as thoroughly as I normally do was this spring and summer where I had an absorbent amount of grubs that were eating up my roses. Now, last year or last season, which was this season here, I did not have those issues with the grubs decimating my rose bushes. So, me capturing that data, it made me think, okay, wow, having the leaves down, because I know some people do, end up leaving them down until the spring. I just found, with this zone and the fluctuation of the weather, picking up the leaves did not make a hotel for those bugs that could end up destroying your garden. So that was the one thing that I did. But like I said, for some, it may end up being, hey, leave those leaves down as a protection for, the soil and your plants. But on the con side, what that could end up doing is making a safe haven for, those pesky bugs that end up destroying your garden. Another con could be, when I do end up deadheading like my cone flowers or echinaceas, you're not having, number one, that winter interest, and number two, not supplying nature, like the birds, with the seeds to be able to have food sustenance. So that could be looked as a con for cleaning up your garden, because that circle of life of, as the plants are dying and go to seed heads, now other forms of nature cannot find sustenance, to have them through the season. But then also keeping them out of your garden to address maybe the, unfriendly bugs that may come out later on in the season. I think one of my big issues for cleaning up in the fall, especially if I'm cutting things back, I have the tendency of not labeling everything. So then there ends up being, okay, what is that? Where you end up forgetting what you planted. So you don't have that plant identification if you end up cutting things back in the fall. And when we talk about wildlife, cleaning up can also impact their habitat of the good pollinators, the good insects, that you want in your garden. Having the leaves, for them to find shelter. By cleaning those up, you can sort of like offset wildlife's, habitats. And lastly, I don't know about you guys. I tend to end up having multiple things going on at one time. And it can get overwhelming. You're trying to get the garden cleaned up. You're trying to work on a project. You got family life, you got work life. And it can sometimes get overwhelming and end up burning you out. So, one of the things that I have done to sort of like offset the getting overwhelmed or burned out when it comes to cleaning up my garden is I do it in stages. I actually made these cute little those. They were the little bricks that I ended up painting and labeling them based off of zones in my garden. I think there are like 15 zones, and what that consists of is I've broken up my yard into those zones to where, hey, on this day, I'm going to be working in this zone, and this is all that I'm doing, so that I don't get overwhelmed and you don't end up getting burned out. So I do believe by having my schedule laid out is a benefit for me to be able to not end up getting overwhelmed or burned out when I'm doing garden cleanup. Now, I did write down as far as the weather. While living here in Georgia, I mean, we have a longer growing season. We have warmer days for a longer period of time. But one of the things that I know, while it is a pro when it comes to garden, you're not having to work out in cooler weather. Mind you, I do prefer like when the temperature is like in the 60s. I do prefer that type of temperature to be able to work out in the garden. But also in the spring you have the warmer weather, but then you also have the longer days in regards to having more light in order for you to work in your garden. So I do believe that is definitely a pro for cleaning up your garden in the springtime. Another pro in regards to not cleaning up until the spring is the winter interest. Now, if you don't have like evergreens that are in your garden, having and leaving like, echinaceas, sunflowers, even though it is not as vibrant, it does provide spring interest for you. I know when I think about, spring, going out there cleaning in the spring, there's some excitement there because, you start to see, plants start to pop up like my autumn joy sedum. Those, I know what the version of it is, but those guys, the roses, the rosebud looking pop-ups, it just looks so adorable, when the hostas start to pop up. It's just that sign that spring is in the air. My magnolia, it has its buds on there, for the winter. In the spring, that is just a sign that spring is right around the corner. So there's some enjoyment that you can get out of waiting until the spring to clean up, because as you're cleaning up, there's probably surprises under the leaves or what have you that are popping through that can bring you a lot of joy in regards to spring is right around the corner. All right, so one of the cons that I think for spring cleanup, I don't know about you guys, but I know, especially when I got started, it would be I'm cleaning up, I'm planting stuff, I'm mulching, and then it's like, man, you're so tired, that you can't really enjoy the beauty that you've just created. So I do think that can be a con of robbing you of your joy when you do your cleanup in the spring. And then if you're trying to do it all, cleaning up, you can sometimes miss key opportunities to be able to plant your spring plants. So I think you said, one garden boot don't fit all. You have to take into consideration your zone, your weather conditions, your time. You have to allocate to cleaning up your garden and do what's best for you, because what may work for me may not end up working for someone else. But I just wanted to be able to share with you guys some of the things that, based off of some data that I have been tracking, like I said, for the last 2 seasons, what has been successful, things that I have seen in my garden not end up negatively being impacted by insects or even by the weather. I know, like I said, we have been having cooler temperatures, and I was second guessing myself. Do I sit here, and prune like my limelights, any of my hydrangeas, except for, like my endless summers and what have you, to whether or not, if we end up having a cold spell, is that going to end up damaging the branch where I cut it? Those are some of the things that, I end up taking in mind, when I'm deciding on whether or not to do cleanup in the fall or in the spring. Two more things that I want to mention in regards to waiting until the spring. If you're somebody that ends up allowing the leaves to stay on the ground, they're not going to break down, that quickly. So now you got heavier leaves that you got to blow and get up, so that can end up making your cleanup process even longer. Then last but not least is weeds. I know here, when that warm weather breaks, if I'm not getting those weeds or those vines that pop up in the fall, then they are definitely going to take over come spring. So sometimes waiting until spring, you can end up creating more work for yourself when it comes to weeding your beds. All right, guys, so takeaways, that I hope by doing the pros and cons of, garden cleanup, fall versus spring, that you guys got some good tips. But there's a few things that I just wanted to, just call out again. Having a balanced approach, I think that is probably the biggest takeaway, because like I said, what works for me may not work for someone else. So having a balanced game plan when it comes to your garden cleanup is based off of your needs. While we like to get best tips from other gardeners, at the end of the day, this is about what works for you, what works for your schedule, what allows you to be able to maintain your garden in the condition that you want it to be. Another thing, understanding your climate. Here in Georgia, like I said, we have a longer growing season, but we have high humidity, and that becomes a haven for those pesky bugs. So taking those things into consideration, I think, is crucial for you determining when you want to do your garden cleanup. Your schedule and energy. Now, while I may be, as my husband says, the Energizer Bunny when it comes to gardening, you know what? Sometimes it does catch up to me. It catches up to me where it's like, okay, you're doing too much. Because, sometimes you strive for perfection. In the meantime, you're beating yourself down. So that is another thing to take in consideration. Look at your schedule. What is that energy level in order for you to be able to maintain it? The other thing is determine what you're willing to do to address pests and disease. I choose to get in front of it. I choose not to have to use, harmful pesticides. And I think by me getting in front of it when it comes to cleanup, that reduces the chances of me having to use pesticides. Now, mind you, like I said, everybody does what's best for them. The same pests or bugs or insects that may be a problem for somebody else may not be a problem, for me. So those are things that you need to take into consideration. And then reflect and adapt. How does your garden respond to if you clean up in the fall or if you clean up in the spring? And that's part of the reason why every time I went out into the garden, I was jotting stuff down, to see how the garden was responding. So those are some things that I take away. Now, this is the thing, gardening is your personal preference, what you like to do, what amount of time you have to invest in your garden. Now, by evaluating your garden, what you're able to do is understand the needs of your garden and your personal preference. Like I said, every garden boot don't fit every gardener. So take those things into consideration, when you are determining what best suits your needs for garden cleanup. So I hope you found, the few, I think there were 6, pros and cons of cleaning up fall versus spring useful to you. And with that being said, come along with me while I go ahead and clean up my hillside. All right, so this is the side and the hillside garden area that I'm going to be working on. I have to definitely do a hard cut of my Artemisias. I, once again, did not stay on top of this, but if you go and take a look at it, you can see down towards the bottom, there's new growth. So I'm going to get all of this cut back. And then this is a verbena. I don't think it is the perennial, but I'm not going to take it out. I'm going to leave it, trim it back, see if it ends up coming back. But yeah, as you can see, the frost really did a number on the bed. But I'm going to go ahead and get this cleaned up. And then, like I said, over here, my roses. Look at that Helen Von Steen lambs there. I'm just not feeling this. So those guys are going to be taken out. Now, I have been not propagating. I dug up some other plants out of other beds to thin them out. And I believe I'm going to put some of the bachelor buttons over here. I did get a ground cover plant that I'm going to put in here, because you see this right here. This here is hardy geraniums. It was too much over here in regards to the heat, because I put them all along here. I'm going to see in the areas if there is stuff to be dug up, and I'll put those guys in a pot and see if I can get them to growing again. But yeah, this is a lot, and part of the reason why, I am choosing to get my garden beds cleaned up fall heading into winter, so that they are already nice and taken care of. All right, so I got the bed cleaned out, and as you can see, I removed all of the Helen Von Steen lamb's ear. What I did, like I said, along the bed here, I planted this, which is St. John worts. I don't know how to pronounce that first part of it, but this is the non-invasive one, and is not detrimental to animals. So I did put some of the lamb's ear in a container, which I'm kind of hoping will alleviate what it was doing in this bed, smothering. I put some bachelor buttons in here, cut back my bobos, and also my roses. And then this is the thing, right there was a lamb's ear, and as you can see, it looks like one of my daffodils are coming up. Like I said, this crazy weather is not so friendly to confusing the plants. And then down here on the hillside garden, I clip back my Artemidas, and it'll end up bouncing back really nicely. So I trimmed back the verbene just a little bit, and now we're gonna go ahead and get these areas mulched. All right, so the bed is all mulched, and guys, you know what? Having a clean bed is is just to die for. I just so love how nice and clean it looks. And then look at the hillside. It was crazy looking. It was crazy looking. And to be able to have it look so nice makes it all worth it. Well, guys, thank you again for visiting Inspiring Garden Corner. And if you enjoy my content and the many projects that I am constantly working on, please consider subscribing.